So here we are with this magic stuff, protein, that we think is one primordial substance that gets absorbed whole, right, and incorporated into our cells. Now, that idea, by the way, was laid to rest by some very interesting observations that were performed on a most unfortunate person. There was a fur trapper in Canada by the name of Alexis St. Martin. And Alexis St. Martin happened to have the great misfortune of being shot in the abdomen. Most people that get shot in the abdomen in those days died. But Alexis St. Martin didn't die. And in fact, what happened was he had a connection that formed where the inside of his stomach communicated now with his skin. He had a fistula. He had a gastrocutaneous fistula. And he was cared for by a famous army surgeon by the name of William Beaumont. He thought, what an opportunity for science. And so he would collect some of the juice, that he would put a tube into that hole and collect some of the juice that came out of it. Or he would take pieces of meat and tie them to a string and dip them in and wait a little while and pull them back out. And then he would look at the juice that came out. And out of this, he made some seminal observations, mainly that, in fact, it did not seem that proteins were absorbed whole, but it seemed like something happened to them in the gastric juice. And this, of course, was the origin of our understanding of digestion. Now, subsequent studies on protein hydrolysates by lots of chemists showed that, in fact, proteins could be broken down into nitrogen-containing acids, which we now call amino acids, okay? So proteins were built from amino acids. Now, just for fun, I will tell you that the first amino acid that was ever identified wasn't recognized as being part, by the way, of, wasn't recognized as being part of a protein, but the first amino acid that was ever identified, not yet known as part of AA as amino acid, to be identified, was identified by two French chemists, okay? Louis Vauquelin and Pierre Robiquet, and they isolated it from asparagus juice. And they named this, anybody want to take a guess what they named it? Asparagine, of course. They named it asparagine. Okay? And they made a really interesting observation. How many people here have eaten asparagus? How many of you, after you've eaten asparagus, have noticed that your pee smells kind of funky? Okay? That's oxidation products of asparagine. That's what you're smelling, is the oxidation product of that. And they crystallized this, but it wasn't known at the time to be part of proteins. And in fact, the first amino acid to be identified as parts of proteins, you can see in this table, was actually leucine. Okay? And in 1819, and a year later, glycine. And you can see it took over 100 years. It wasn't until 1936 that the last of the amino acids, natural amino acids, threonine, was identified. So with that as our understanding of amino acids, we can now ask, what's an amino acid? And an amino acid, as you know, right, consists of a central carbon atom, which we will call the alpha carbon, and linked to this are 4 different groups. An amino group, NH2, a carboxyl group, COOH, a hydrogen, shown here, and an R group, a special group that we're going to have a lot more to say about through the rest of this lecture. This R group is called the side chain.